Jodie Marsh and I'm the General Manager of Sanguine Estate Wines, which is a small family-run boutique winery in Heathcote, Central Victoria. And I'm standing here tonight in the Maribyrnong Boathouse, which is owned by Master Chef Gary Mehigan. Tonight we're holding our annual family dinner and we always start with a bit of an educational exercise. So tonight we're doing a food and wine masterclass. It'll be hosted by wine expert Matt Skinner, who you probably have seen on the television advertisements, my brother Mark, who is Sanguine Estates Winemakers, and also Gary himself. Now tonight they'll actually be talking about a particular vintage of our wine to be matched with a dish. However, because we pride ourselves on consistency, you could have it with the 08 vintage or even the 2013 vintage. So sit back with a beautiful Gary Mehigan meal and a glass of Sanguine Estate wine and enjoy. Welcome, welcome, welcome. How is everybody feeling tonight? Pretty toasty in here, I think. It's a bit cold outside. For those of you who don't know me, and there's probably very few in the room that don't know me, my name's Jodie Marsh and I'm the General Manager of Sanguine Estate Wines. For those of you who do know me, I'm still the General Manager of Sanguine Estate Wines. I'd also like to introduce my business partners, which are my family, of course. My brother Mark is Sanguine Estates winemaker. And a trophy winner. I've got to get that in as much as I can tonight. So, Mark. Yeah. Stay focused. Then, of course, there's my father, Tony, and he is the wonderful helper to Mark in the vineyard and the winery, but he's also now manning our cellar door. Does a great job at that too, I might add. My mum, Lynn, who is an extraordinary office helper and also wonderful babysitter when we need her to babysit, and an expert at bottling. So that's her role. My husband, Brett, who's stripy shirt, he has recently started to work in the family business as well as our international sales manager. So I'm his boss.
I'm his boss too.
We're both his boss. We can share that role. And the person who's missing tonight, very sadly, and she sends her apologies, is Mark's wife, Melissa, who is our finance manager. And Melissa is at home. She has a very, very good excuse. She's at home nursing a 1.5-week-old. Oh. So Mark's just had a baby boy called Spence. That's 3 boys. Someone that needs absolutely no introduction at all is Mr. Gary Mehigan.
I thought you were going to say Matt Skinner.
Yeah.
I know who you are, Matt. I know.
As our food expert, and then, of course, our host for our masterclass and wine expert, and somebody that you've been seeing on television advertisements of late, and probably when the cricket breaks are on. Is that right, Matt?
When we're losing wickets,
when
usually,
losing wickets,
so that's terrible.
You see Matt Skinner, that's it. So welcome to Matt Skinner.
Thanks, Jodie. How's everyone doing? Excellent. That's pathetic.
That's my line. You can't use that line.
I think you got it from me. I know it's cold outside, but we've got an amazing... Hands up who came last year to this dinner. Most of you. So you know it's an amazing night of food, of family, of friends, and most importantly, wine. I'm allowed to say that,
yeah, absolutely.
I think so. So what we're going to do over the course of the next 45 minutes is explore exactly that. We're going to explore food and wine, and we're going to discuss it between friends and family. So does that sound okay with everybody? Yeah? Because it's a bit of a strange world. Wine can be confusing enough as it is, but I think once we get into the world of food and wine matching, it can get even more difficult and often unnecessarily confusing. And I think we've come so far with wine over the last few years, and we've come so far with food. Obviously, programs like MasterChef, the fact that we've all got the ability to travel to different parts of the world far more easily than the generations before us have meant that great food and wine experiences are so much more accessible nowadays. I think a little bit, of GFC as well has meant that we've gone back to our kitchens. We're far more interested in provenance now. where we source our food from and how much we pay for it. So we've become far more interested in food, and I think that's ultimately leading us to wine. So probably first question to kick us off, Gary, food and wine matching, is it fact or fallacy?
I was going to ask you that question. You know, for me, it's interesting as a chef because I've found with wine dinners, particularly in the past, that we get so convoluted with the food that, in fact, that it takes over the wine and then it becomes really confusing. And what I try and do is, when I had my first chat with Mark, is just say, give me one note that, as a winemaker, is important for you. You know, so for example, he said to me the Chardonnay melon. So then straight away I've got something to latch onto as a foodie. And I can match that. You know the chef's cheats way? Read the bottle. You know, because on the bottle it'll say, lovely oaky characteristics with zesty lemon and vanilla. And you don't, exactly. And a lot of winemakers don't. But I love that because I read it and they go, how on earth can you match that wine? And I go, read the back of the bottle. It says tastes like lychees. So that's what I'm going to do. And I think it's always a mistake. Most winemakers now don't put the notes on the back, which I like. Because once they put it in your head, that's it. You can't get rid of it.
You can't get rid of it.
And you're writing notes before the wine's bottled. So you're looking at barrel samples long time before wines evolve and change, and you know the notes don't always match.
And as a chef, and I think I've got a fairly good palate as a chef. I eat a lot of food. You can tell from the extreme body shape, right? But it's always fascinating to talk to people that love their wine because I get them constantly wrong all the time because the things that I associate with are often not what they're associating the flavours with. So I love the sommelier that comes up and says it has notes of barnyard and cabbage, and I go, you keep that one, I'll have something else. So I'm looking for yummy flavours, I'm looking for food flavours, I'm looking for things that evoke a little emotion or a little something in me, you know. So it doesn't matter whether it's lavender or cooked fruit or, you know, when someone says jam to me, then I go, yeah, great, love that. So that's what it means to me. So that's what I've tried to do. I tried to pick a key note or a flavour out of the wine and then match something that I would enjoy eating with it.
We know you've got to get back into the kitchen. Can you tell us a little bit about what the first three canapés we've got?
So I'm actually, you know what I'm going to say first of all? You said that this was like family. You've got no choice, have you? It's so tight. I'm looking at it. You're so close, it's really quite uncomfortable. No, it's not. You know, it's fine. Okay, so the first one, the one that's closest to you, the one that's going with the Chardonnay, is a little crouton, so olive oil, salt, pepper, a little bit of garlic, blue swimmer crab, lemon aioli, so like a mayonnaise, so it's quite punchy with lemon, avocado and Dukkah spice. So I picked out that melon, I just went melon crab, melon, nuts, that's what's in the Dukkah. You've got a bit of cumin, you've got principally sesame seeds, some hazelnuts. So that's why I picked that out. Melon and crab all goes together, so should work really well.
Fantastic Chardonnay flavours right off the bat. You know, citrus, a little bit of that slight nuttiness from the Dukkah. It looks incredible.
Okay, and delicate croutons, so be careful, otherwise it's going to be eaten by your shirt rather than where it's supposed to go. So just be careful. Next one I did, there's a little homemade biscuit underneath that. So we made that with almond meal. There's a touch of flour in it. There are some people that are celiac, so you've got a purely almond-based biscuit. Works really well. It's got olive oil, rosemary, currants, and pepitas in, just blended together, rolled out, so it's like a little cracker. And on that, slow-cooked salmon, 46 degrees, a little capsicum and paprika butter, and then serrano ham, so ham on. So a little bit oily. It's got some, so not nice flavours. And again, I think characteristics in there, you said cherry, didn't you? Was it cherry? No, rosé was...
Yeah, rosé's more kind of a candied apple.
You don't want to be
There's a little bit of savoury stuff going on in there as well.
So I thought there's a bit of oiliness in there. Love ham on. And in fact, ham on goes with anything, just so you know. Coffee, tea, mid-afternoon, late afternoon, breakfast, just everything. The third one there is chicken parfait. So it's like a little chicken liver pate. That would be the rougher end of the scale, but parfait is very soft, very delicate. A little tartine of mushrooms, so we've got exotic mushrooms fried with garlic, parsley, so quite earthy, a little bit funky on that parfait, and then a sweet brioche. All right? Now you're going to get a fourth one, and that's to go with the Shiraz, I think, the last one.
Yep.
So that's a classic beef short rib, slow cooked. We cook that overnight in the pizza oven, pop out the bones, cut it up, and then serve with a marmalade of onions, bone marrow, and a bit of mash. So just a little reminder of winter. And reminder that if you eat too much of it, you will, in fact, look like me, so careful. All right?
Anyway.
Although I'm convinced that one day someone's going to go, the perfect body shape is gas. That's what it's supposed to be.
Anyone hungry? Yes. We've got to let you go. You've got to get back into
I'm just
the
going to check the beef.
Yep,
Crack on.
and you're going to be back.
Let me know what you think.
Gary, Mehigan.
Cheers.
Thanks, Gary. Right, we're going to move on to Reds. Red fans in the room? Yes, I think everybody. Yeah.
We're here to
Sanguine Estate dinner.
tasting. So.
Be worried if people didn't put their hands up.
Absolutely.
Right, we're saving the best till last, and we will get there. But as I mentioned before, we're going to talk about Spain's native red superstar. We're going to talk about Tempranillo.
Here we go.
And
I don't know why you missed. I don't know why you missed.
A bit hungry.
You know why? Because they said, "Should we give some to Matt and Mark?" And I go, "No." They get
Now
nothing.
you have to watch for 20 minutes while we quickly taste and.
yeah, that's right. Talk amongst yourselves. No. It's a great opportunity to talk about Tempranillo, and I guess the best way to preface this is you will have seen over the last sort of half decade here in Australia the rise of alternative varieties. So we've grown up in Australia with grape varieties like Cabernet Sauvignon, Shiraz, Merlot, Grenache, those kind of things. They've been in the ground for a long time, but increasingly we're seeing more and more things like Tempranillo, Sangiovese, Nero d'Avola, Negro Amaro, Primitivo, lots of really interesting, sort of weird and wonderful varieties that are finding their way into the ground here in Australia, and a lot of them have been here for quite some time. So Tempranillo, for example, has been here for many, many moons. When did you first plant Temp, Mark?
I planted Temp in 2002, I think. I started planting it. I've planted little bits since, and I'm still waiting for some of the new clones to come out. So there's only 2 clones floating around Australia at the moment that you can plant, and they've gone to the University of Rioja and got some really good clones and brought them out, but they're not quite available yet. So I'm expanding the planting, every year really, and waiting for these new clones to come in.
And why Tempranillo?
Well, that's a bit of a long story, but it actually, the thought entered my mind before I even really knew a lot about Tempranillo, and I was in California going around with Richard Smart in a bus tour with a group of a few Australians, and I was just chatting to him about Heathcote and what he thought was a potential for Heathcote. And he said that they'd been doing a lot of climatic comparisons between different regions of Australia with the rest of Europe. And Heathcote actually fitted very closely in with certain parts of Rioja. Now, Spain is a fairly vast territory of lots of different climates, but as a whole, it was a very good fit. So that's where the seed was planted.
Yeah.
And I came home saying I want to put some Tempranillo in. So.
And I guess it's the native red superstar of Spain, and you find it planted all over the country, but probably most famous in Rioja and Navarra, as up there with Garnacha and places like Toro as well. Yeah. Ribera del Duero, we're seeing a lot of sort of almost a very modern style of Tempranillo coming out of those parts.
Yeah, and probably more fitting into what Australians are doing with theirs as well, because it goes from being a light rosé all the way up to being 3 years in American oak, full-on big, rich, over-the-top style. So Tempranillo is quite broad in its style.
So probably a really good opportunity to ask you about the certain characteristics that we should be looking for in the glass in front of us.
Well, this is from the 2011 vintage, so I don't know if any of you know too much about that particular vintage, but it was a very cold, wet vintage. We had to do a lot of work in the vineyard just to keep the vines alive and keep leaf on them. And so what I'm seeing in a lot of the 11s is they're very savoury wines. So, and what you'll find is when there's not too much sunshine around and they can ripen slowly, is you hang on to a lot of those more savoury aromatics, like the spices and the herbs and dried herbs, things like that. And the fruit is almost secondary, and you'll see that in a lot of European wines where you're smelling, you're getting all these savoury things going on, and then the fruit is really at the background. And that's what I see in that wine. That's got really lovely upfront spice and herb, and the oak is really subtle. It's I think it's about 5% new oak. It's really, really low level new oak, and there's background cherry. It's kind of smoky cherry is kind of how you describe the wine.
And can I ask, does 100% of the wine see oak?
Yes, in this case, yeah. In this case, it does.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm doing different things each year with Tempranillo. So with this particular one, yeah, it's 100% oak.
Because it's not a feature of the wine. For me, when I made notes about these wines a few weeks ago, for me, the thing that really struck me about this wine was its freshness. You know, and it's got this wonderful sort of bright red fruit. You know, and it's things, for me, it's like sour cherry. There's a little bit of plum there as well, and it's really, and red currant, really vibrant in the glass. And the other thing too, and I guess it probably goes back to what you were saying a second ago, that lovely savoury aspect to this wine, and I see it almost as being a slightly leafy sort of character. It's almost like, you know, and when I say leafy, I mean things like autumn leaves, you know, those sort of dried leaf character. And I see a little bit of it in this wine as well. People often say about Tempranillo as well that it can be a bit meaty and have a slightly meaty sort of slightly roasting meat kind of character. Is that a character that you see in your wines at all?
In a couple of vintages, yeah, definitely. And I can see this going in that direction. I think it will have that meaty character as it develops. It certainly will sort of head that way. But yeah, I think the tannin structure is always really interesting on Tempranillos as well. They can be quite big tannins. I had someone describe them as being like big balls, like lots of big balls.
Whoa.
Mate. Whereas
please explain.
I'll go further on that one. Whereas like a Pinot Noir has got lots of little fine balls of tannin. Tempranillo has got more sort of bigger, blocky balls of tannin.
I'm glad that you're able to explain that. I know exactly what you mean. I guess for me, the thing that I think about with tannin, which are probably your balls. I don't know. Hang on. No. I think about pixels, and if you look at an image, a digital image, lots of little tiny pixels. I think about things, grape varieties like Pinot Noir, for example, or in this case Tempranillo, being made up of lots of pixels, and things like Cabernet and Shiraz in their youth being made up of bigger pixels and sort of not being quite as cohesive in their youth. For me, this wine's got lovely fine tannins. Has everyone had a chance to have a taste of this wine? Yep. It's got lovely. They're grippy and they're dry, but they're very, very fine tannins. Can everybody sort of feel those in your mouth? I guess what's important to say is, with regards to the glass that you're drinking out of at the moment, this is our Red B glass from Plum. Really distinctive shape, and obviously it's got this almost flared lip. And if everybody's got a little bit in their glass now, if they can take it up to their mouth, first and foremost, if you give it a bit of a swirl, obviously that great big bowl shape there is there to, like the Chardonnay glass, to be able to release aromas and to be able to release the layers. And we talked about the savoury smells as well as the fruit smells in Tempranillo. They're all able to be released in that big sort of surface area there. But if you take this glass up to your mouth and have a sip from it now, I want you to think about where you first feel the wine in your mouth. Front, middle or back? Front. Now, I guess different to the other glasses on the table, if you think about this glass when it's horizontal, basically that flared lip, the action of it pulls your bottom lip away and allows the wine to spill straight into the front of your palate. Now, there's a bit of a misconception that, you know, a big glass is perfect for any old big red. It's not, and you've got to be so careful because, you know, if you put something like Cabernet or any, you know, bigger Shiraz into this glass, what you find is when you pour the wine up, you take the glass up to your lip, you pour it in, you get this great big hit of fruit right at the front of the palate where the glass delivers it, but you get a great big whack of tannin straight off the boat, and that almost acts like a barricade to stop the fruit being able to get through and registering on the middle and back of your palate. Whereas here, those lovely fine tannins that you get in the Tempranillo and Pinot Noir, for example, you know, they hit the front of your palate, but they're not so drying that they're going to stop the fruit from getting onto your palate. So that's the purpose of the flared lip, I guess. So it works really well in this case.
Yeah, and the tannins in that wine are not typical to Tempranillo. They're normally, and previous vintages they've been a bit more blocky.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that a factor of the vintage?
I think it could be, yeah. I think it's that long ripening period. You know, the tannins really develop and mature, so you're picking really almost, you know, early harvest characters, you know, because they're really savoury, but they've been on the vine for a long time, so you're not getting the seeds mature, the skin's really mature. So, you know, and that's what you can get those really coarse tannins from. It's from the seed and skin.
There's been a lot of talk about 2011 as a vintage. and around Australia. And I think a lot of wine journalists have sort of blanketly almost made sweeping generalisations about the vintage.
It's an absolute shame, because there are some cracking wines.
There are some cracking wines that have come out of that vintage, and particularly out of your region. I think, I think
Heathcote's done really well. Yep.
And I think, for example, Margaret River had one of its great vintages in 2011.
Yep.
Even, I think the Barossa had a really testing vintage in 2011 because it rained right before they harvested, and there was, I think a lot of the valley floor in the Barossa was underwater at the time of harvest. But then, McLaren Vale, which is only a couple of hours south of Barossa, heat and rainfall were totally different. So it's really hard to make generalisations about a vintage.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think this wine is really a great example of that. That good producers, even in tough vintages, will make great wines. They'll go the extra mile.
Well, at the Heathcote Wine Show, which is we've just had, the 11s was a favourite bracket of the judges. They really loved a lot of the 11s, and they were really complimentary of the 2011 Shirazes from Heathcote. So don't be turned off 11s. What's that? Just balanced. They were really well balanced. They were pretty aromatic. There's still a bit of weight to them because it dried up. Also in April, it just dried right up. So if you could get through that bad period and actually have some fruit at the end of the season, you could leave it on the vine for a long time. That's what I was saying. You could just let it hang, and it's still really like it's an early harvested wine, but it's got really good tannin structure and mouthfeel. So
absolutely delicious.
Don't shy away from them.
No. Guys, how is it with the Parfait? Good?
Try it. That is excellent.
Fantastic. There's woohoo! Yeah, I know.
That's a bit of a showstopper, that one. That's a excellent match. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Earthy, sweet, lovely.
It's the right elements in that food to go with that wine. I have. I've taken a bite out of mine. I snuck one in.
It's amazing. I didn't see you do that.
Yeah, you can see
it's incredible. Wonderful, wonderful wine.